Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So, if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where we read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and to give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times. So, stick around. So, if you remember last episode, we read Alma chapter 54, which is where Captain Moroni and Amaron send letters to each other. Amaron approaches Captain Moroni saying, hey, do you want to exchange prisoners? And Captain Moroni says, hey, you will be smitten down by the wrath of God if you don't leave us alone and you stop attacking us. Also, no, I won't unless you listen to my conditions and do it my way. And the Amaron goes, screw you, you suck. Also, sure, sounds great, bye. Anyways, it's a very fun look into how Captain Moroni and Amaron actually write, because again, these are first-person letters. These are from their hand, and so it's very, very interesting to hear what they sound like, and what kind of people they are, over letter at least. Anyways, very interesting. Go back and listen to that episode if you haven't already. But yeah, I think without further ado, let's read Alma chapter 55. Now it came to pass that when Moroni had received this epistle, he was more angry, because he knew that Amaron had a perfect knowledge of his fraud. Yea, he knew that Amaron knew that it was not a just cause that had caused him to wage a war against the people of Nephi. And he said, behold, I will not exchange prisoners with Amaron, save he will withdraw his purpose, as I have stated in my epistle, for I will not grant unto him that he shall have any more power than what he hath got. Behold, I know the place where the Lamanites do guard my people, whom they have taken prisoners. And as Amaron would not grant unto me mine epistle, behold, I will give unto him according to my words. Yea, I will seek death among them, until they shall sue for peace. And now it came to pass that when Moroni had said these words, he caused that a search should be made among his men, that perhaps he might find a man who was a descendant of Laman among them. So, this is very exciting. So what Moroni does is, even though Amaron says, sure, I will follow your conditions because it will just give me more money to spare to feed my war machine. Yippee! Moroni is like, actually, that sounds terrible. I do not want to support this man in any way. I'm not going to give him any more power than he already has. And he hasn't outright stated his plan yet, but it's very fun to read these first few verses and understand what he's getting at. In verse 3, he says, I know the place where the Lamanites do guard my people. He's like, I know where the prisoners are. And I've decided that I'm not going to do a prison exchange with Amaron on any condition. And so, I'm sure you can understand what they're getting at. He's definitely gonna try and get his prisoners back himself. By force, as it says in verse 3 at the very end, I will seek death among them until they shall sue for peace. He's like, according to my word, since they won't stop attacking, I will seek death among them. What a way to word that. Oh my goodness, what an intense dude. Anyways, we ended with verse 4, which is where Moroni is like, hey, let's find someone who is ancestrally a Lamanite. Because again, nowadays in this Book of Mormon timeline, Nephite and Lamanite is no longer really a familial term. It's no longer ancestral or tribal. It is more how you identify, how you self-identify, and who you want to be related to, who you want to be grouped together with. And it really has nothing to do with blood. Remember, Amaron himself is a Nephite ancestrally. And so, again, there could very easily be ancestral Lamanites among the Nephite people, and they would still call themselves Nephites. Because at this point, it's now a sense of personal identity, as opposed to literal blood identity. So, anyways, so what are they going to use this Lamanite for? Clearly, Moroni has a stratagem in mind. And so keep in mind the overarching theme of the entire war chapters. In almost every story in the war chapters, there is a winning side and a losing side that kind of flip-flops between the Nephites and the Lamanites. Usually, one of these sides represents satanic tactics that we are trying to avoid, and the other side is representing someone who either defends successfully against those tactics or is tricked by them. Either way, we can learn something of how to avoid it from their example. And so, when you're reading this story about how the Nephites get their Lamanite prisoners back, ask yourself, who is being tricked here? And how were they tricked? And what can that tell me about defending myself against tricks like this? And it came to pass that they found one whose name was Laman, and he was one of the servants of the king who was murdered by Amalickiah. Now Moroni caused that Laman and a small number of his men should go forth unto the guards who were over the Nephites. Now the Nephites were guarded in the city of Gid, therefore Moroni appointed Laman and caused that a small number of men should go with him. And when it was evening, Laman went to the guards who were over the Nephites, and behold, they saw him coming, and they hailed him. But he saith unto them, Fear not. Behold, I am a Lamanite. Behold, we have escaped from the Nephites, and they sleep. And behold, we have taken of their wine and brought with us. Now when the Lamanites heard these words, they received him with joy, and they said unto him, Give us of your wine that we may drink. We are glad that you have thus taken wine with you, for we are weary. But Laman said unto them, Let us keep of our wine till we go against the Nephites to battle. But this saying only made them more desirous to drink of the wine. For, said they, we are weary, therefore let us take of the wine, and by we shall receive wine for our rations, which will strengthen us to go against the Nephites. And Laman said unto them, You may do according to your desires. And it came to pass that they did take of the wine freely, and it was pleasant to their taste. Therefore they took of it more freely, and it was strong, having been prepared in its strength. So even if you aren't already familiar with the story, I'm sure red flags are waving in your head right now. Like, some stranger comes up to you as a Lamanite guard and says, Hey, we just escaped from the Nephites, and we have wine. And all you can think about is, dude, I want some of that wine. That sounds amazing. I'm exhausted. Having some wine to take the edge off would be amazing. And so, you convince this supposed Lamanite escapee to give you of the wine, and you drink of it. And it's really strong. And so what do? You drink even more. 1, don't take wine from strangers. And 2, they're giving away some of their personal judgment to an external substance. And so, they're therefore giving away some of their agency, some of their free will, some of their awareness, and therefore their defense against these quote-unquote satanic tactics. And so when you give your agency away to anything, whether it be a substance or anything else that decides how you live your life for you, that is a way of, again, giving away your agency, and that allows things to slip under that you would not have let slip under otherwise. So, I suppose the lesson thus far is be very careful at what you let decide things for you. And it came to pass that they did drink and were merry, and by they were all drunken. And now when Laman and his men saw that they were all drunken and were in a deep sleep, they returned to Moroni and told him all the things that had happened. And now this was according to the design of Moroni. And Moroni had prepared his men with weapons of war, and he went to the city Gid, while the Lamanites were in a deep sleep and drunken, and cast in weapons of war unto the prisoners, insomuch that they were all armed. Yea, even to their women, and all those of their children, as many as were able to use a weapon of war, when Moroni had armed all those prisoners, and all those things were done, in a profound silence. But had they awakened the Lamanites, behold, they were drunken, and the Nephites could have slain them. But behold, this was not the desire of Moroni. He did not delight in murder or bloodshed, but he delighted in the saving of his people from destruction. And for this cause he might not bring upon him injustice, he would not fall upon the Lamanites and destroy them in their drunkenness. But he had obtained his desires, for he had armed those prisoners of the Nephites who were within the wall of the city, and had given them power to gain possession of those parts which were within the walls. And then he caused the men who were with him to withdraw a pace from them, and surround the armies of the Lamanites. So now, the Lamanites at this point don't even know they've already lost, because they're surrounded by Nephites, and the people inside of their walls, in their prison cells, are also armed to the teeth. Everyone that can use a weapon has one, even the children, which is kind of awesome. And yet they don't know how screwed they are yet because they're too busy passed out drunk. They're completely unaware that anything has happened. Again, they gave their agency and their self-awareness and their self-possession away to something else. Whether it's something that just distracts your attention or fully takes away your judgment, stuff like that should be treated with care. And clearly, in this case, it caused some problems for the Lamanites because they were gone. And now, once they wake up, they are surrounded, not only inside, but also outside the city. They're like doubly surrounded. This is kind of awesome, actually. But also what I want to point out is if this were a perfect allegory, then Moroni would have killed the Lamanites in their sleep. Because that's what Satan would do. You know, Satan destroys us when we are least aware of it. When we are least aware of his influence is when he is the most powerful. And so when the Lamanites, i.e. us, were passed out drunk and completely unaware of our surroundings, that would be the time that he would strike. But Moroni, and the Nephites in general, are not Satan. And even though they used satanic tactics to get into the city, that allegory does not extend all of the way. Because again, they would have been callous, they would have been uncaring, they would have been opportunists, just as Satan is, but they aren't. And so it's a good reminder that even though these people are using, like I said, satanic tactics to trick the Lamanites, they aren't going all the way because they are not Satan. The only reason that they're attacking, that they're tricking, that they're doing any of this is for the defense and the safety and the protection of their people and of their God. So again, another reminder that this is not just mindless war. The Nephites care about their principles, and they uphold them even in the face of a glaring opportunity to kill a lot of Lamanites. They could have taken out that entire city, but they didn't because they care about their principles, and Captain Moroni would not allow that to happen. So yeah, a good reminder, not only to not take wine from strangers, but also that Moroni is cool. Very unprecedented and novel things that are being explained in this chapter. Now behold, this was done in the nighttime, so that when the Lamanites awoke in the morning, they beheld that they were surrounded by the Nephites without, and that their prisoners were armed within. And thus they saw that the Nephites had power over them, and in these circumstances they found that it was not expedient that they should fight with the Nephites. Therefore, their chief captains demanded their weapons of war, and they brought them forth and cast them at the feet of the Nephites, pleading for mercy. Now behold, this was the desire of Moroni. He took them prisoners of war and took possession of the city, and caused that all the prisoners should be liberated, who were Nephites, and they did join the army of Moroni, and were a great strength to his army. And it came to pass that he did cause the Lamanites whom he had taken prisoners, that they should commence a labor in strengthening the fortifications round about the city of Gid. And it came to pass that when he had fortified the city Gid, according to his desires, he caused that his prisoners should be taken into the city bountiful, and he also guarded that city with an exceedingly strong force. And it came to pass that they did, notwithstanding all the intrigues of the Lamanites, keep and protect all the prisoners whom they had taken, and also maintain all the ground and the advantage which they had retaken. And it came to pass that the Nephites began to be victorious and to reclaim their rights and their privileges. Many times did the Lamanites attempt to encircle them about by night, but in these attempts they did lose many prisoners. And many times did they attempt to administer of their wine to the Nephites, that they might destroy them with poison or drunkenness. But behold, the Nephites were not slow to remember the Lord their God in this their time of affliction. They could not be taken in their snares, yea, they would not partake of their wine, save they had first given to some of the Lamanite prisoners. And they were thus cautious that no poison should be administered among them, for if their wine would poison a Lamanite, it would also poison a Nephite, and thus they did try all their liquors. I love that phrase, for if a wine would poison a Lamanite, it would also poison a Nephite. These Nephites do not feel invulnerable to any of the tricks that they've pulled themselves on the Lamanites. In fact, it's kind of hilarious that the Lamanites are trying to copy them. Now that they took the city of Gid in that certain way, I'm sure that word got around among the Lamanite army how they did that. And so now they're trying to copy them basically and do the same thing, not only by surrounding them by night, which the Nephites did, but also by giving them wine to get them drunk and or dead by poison. And the Nephites, they were the ones that started this. They're not going to get screwed over by a trick that they have already pulled themselves. So I just think it's kind of funny that the Lamanites are just trying to play catch up in a way, that they're like, oh, that was genius, we should try that ourselves. And then it just never works because like it's already been done, sorry. Anyways, that's just kind of entertaining to me. But another thing that I thought was interesting about this section is that in verse 27, it says that Captain Moroni did keep and protect all of the prisoners that he got from the Lamanites. And these people hate him, and the Lamanites are trying everything they can possibly do to get them back. But the Nephite general will not allow that to happen. He's not just stopping them from escaping, but he's also keeping and protecting them. He's making sure that they are protected. He's putting them to work, but he's also, assumedly, giving them food and shelter, and making sure that they're safe, which is probably more than the Nephite prisoners got among the Lamanites. But I think it just shows that Captain Moroni cares about the dignity of everyone under his jurisdiction, whether that's a Nephite or a Lamanite. As long as you're not trying to kill him, you're fine. But if you are, you're a prisoner, and you're going to be put to work fortifying cities. But even if you are a prisoner, according to verse 27, you'll be kept and protected. And so, yes, you will be protected from being returned to your home city, but you'll also just be protected, kept safe. And I think that says volumes about Captain Moroni. I think the way that Captain Moroni acted in this chapter says volumes about who he is as a person. He refused to kill the drunken Lamanites, even though it would have been a golden opportunity to get a large swath of Lamanites dead. But because of his principles, he would not allow him or his armies to do that. And at the same time, he took a lot of Lamanite prisoners, but he treats them well, and he puts them to work doing productive work for his people. So yeah, that says a lot about him. He is a man of principle. And also, he is a man to be very careful about getting drunk. And also I think verse 32 where it says, "And they were thus cautious that no poison should be administered among them." I think that is not only a literal thing, where they didn't allow any poison to be among them, and if the Lamanites gave them any wine, they would always have their Lamanite prisoners taste it first, but I think that can also be very much applied to their spiritual health. They did not allow anything spiritually degrading or poisonous to be had among them. And that could be said for us as well. Are we careful that no poison should be administered among us? Are we careful about what enters our lives and our brains? What are we watching or listening to or being around? It is these kinds of poisonous things that can have an effect on us. And again, it's not literally poison like the Nephites are trying to avoid, but I think that it can definitely apply to us in that way. And now it came to pass that it was expedient for Moroni to make preparations to attack the city Morianton. For behold, the Lamanites had, by their labors, fortified the city Morianton until it had become an exceeding stronghold. And they were continually bringing new forces into that city, and also new supplies of provisions. And thus ended the 29th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. So, all in all, a very interesting chapter. Actually, the whole bit where this Nephite, who used to be a Lamanite named Laman, very convenient, goes to the Lamanite guards to give them wine and get them drunk. I actually made an Instagram reel about that a while ago, so if you can find that, it's both on Instagram and on YouTube, and it's actually perfect and hilarious, and I love it. So, yeah, I do find this chapter very entertaining. If you were not sure about that, I think that it is absolutely hilarious the way that this entire thing went down. And even more so, the fact that after the Lamanites all got drunk and got screwed over by the Nephites by being surrounded both outwardly and inwardly by their armed prisoners within their own city, I'm just imagining like a small child holding a spear that's twice its height, they tried to do it themselves to the Nephites. The Nephites were like, dude, we did this to you. We're not going to fall for the same thing. Who do you think we are? I just think it's so funny. It really comes off as desperate from the Lamanite side, which I find highly entertaining, if you were wondering. But again, it's also another chapter that can teach us a lot about defending ourselves against the Lamanites, whether it be giving away our judgment and self-possession to an external substance, or whether it be allowing poison to be administered among us, whether that be literal poison, which is probably not an issue for you guys, or media, or music, or videos, or movies, or people that you're around. There's a lot of things that can be spiritually degrading, and as we know from learning from Captain Moroni, spiritual preparation is as important as physical preparation. And so when it comes to our spiritual preparedness against Satan, there's not much that we can do physically to prepare. We can't set up walls to stop Satan from getting to us, but we can build habits. We can be in certain places at certain times. And we can make sure that our spirit is not degraded by what enters into it. And so, again, physical preparation matters just as much as spiritual preparation. And so spiritual poison is just as dangerous as actual poison. So anyways, very, very interesting stuff. A good time, truly. So the stand-up verse for this chapter is going to be verse 32, which says, "And they were thus cautious that no poison should be administered among them. For if their wine would poison a Lamanite, it would also poison a Nephite, and thus they did try all their liquors." So this verse is an example of the Nephites learning from experience. Now they didn't get poisoned themselves, but they watched people get poisoned. They heard about how the Nephite army basically poisoned the entirety of the Lamanite guards around the city of Gid. They know what happened, and so they're learning from that experience, and they know if that works against them, it will also work against me. So, if you know a little bit about me, I study journalism right now, and that means that I take a lot of classes about media theory and understanding media literacy, etc. And one concept that exists not only in advertising but also in other things is the fact that we have this idea in our minds that whether it be advertising or just other media messages, they don't affect us, they don't influence us in a way that it does other people. We think, oh, other people are convinced by ads. Other people are swayed by whatever media they view. But we are self-aware. We know. We understand. And so we aren't really influenced by that. When in reality, we're all influenced the same way, but for some reason, each of us feel like we're kind of superior to others in a way because, no, we're self-aware, we have this self-possession, we can't be influenced by that sort of thing. And that is something that the Nephites are not falling into right now. They're not like, oh, those people are vulnerable to that trick, but I could never be vulnerable. They're not falling into that trap. They're going, if that wine will poison a Lamanite, it will also poison a Nephite. We are both equally vulnerable to the same things. And the only reason that they're not falling for the same trick that they pulled on the Lamanites is because they're being really aware of it, and they're being really careful with it. That's why I like this verse so much, is because they are not falling into the hole of, well, that's not really my problem. That's not something that I struggle with, and therefore I don't need to be worried about it. And while that's true to an extent, we're all vulnerable, not only to media messages, like I've learned in my classes, but also to the temptations of Satan, to distractions, to stuff like that. And so when we have that level of self-awareness and humility to accept the fact that we are also vulnerable, then it's much easier to come to terms with the fact that we have to prepare. And then we can go on to figuring out how to prepare. So anyways, I think that this is just a really interesting example of that self-awareness and that humility that these Nephites have to truly prepare themselves and to be vigilant and careful. Because a lot of us feel like, oh, we're fine, we're living the righteous gospel, we grew up in the church all our lives, it's not really an issue that we have to worry about, so we don't really have to be that vigilant. But that's how the Lamanites gotten, They've probably gotten drunk many times, but it was this time that was the dangerous time. So yeah, anyways, a good lesson. So yeah, that is the episode for today. I hope you enjoyed. This is definitely a very interesting chapter and a very entertaining chapter on many levels. In fact, something that I didn't mention is that once the Lamanites woke up from their drunken stupor in verse 23, the Lamanite generals thought it wasn't expedient that they should fight the Nephites at this time. They woke up and they were like, ooh, yeah, no, that's not happening. Anyways, lots of fun stuff happening in this chapter. I hope you enjoyed just as much as I did. But yeah, there's just a few links down in the show notes that I want to let you know about. The first one is a let me know what you learned link. So if you're going to shoot me a message and just let me know what you learned or tell me about something that you like about the Book of Mormon, you can go ahead and message me there, or you can DM me on Instagram. Either way. Next, there are a handful of links to access a digital copy of the Book of Mormon, so if you don't have your own copy and you want to read along or make a study plan or find some chapters to read, you can go ahead and click down below. Thirdly, there is a quick support the show link, so if you want to shoot me a few dollars and support what I do, that would be greatly appreciated. Next, we are on YouTube, so if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, you can find some YouTube shorts. You can also find the podcast there twice a week. It's a lovely time. I also do trivia every once in a while. And finally, if you want to find me where I'm the most active, generally, that would be my Instagram. So if you want to go follow me on Instagram, you can find reels, you can find story updates, you can find trivia. All in all, a good time. So yeah, I'll see you there. That's all I've got for you today. I'll talk to you later. Bye.